Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast here on a Wednesday. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock. We're recording this about 6 o'clock Wednesday night. A lot of quarterback news for the Browns. Of course, we've been talking a lot of Shedeur Sanders, a lot of Travis Hunter, and some big developments since we last talked. First of all, the Browns had a bunch of quarterbacks in 4:30 visits, including Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shook. So that happened. And then, of course, today, Louis Riddick, a former Brown safety, works for ESPN. Never afraid to put his opinion out there, no matter what, has interviewed for GM jobs, and a guy that is not hard to find on Twitter or wherever you want to look for him. He came out and said that maybe Deion Sanders and company don't want Shedeur Sanders to go in the top three. And so that prompted you, Mary Kay, to reach out to Louis Riddick. And again, Louis is a great interview. I remember I talked to him a few years ago about something. He's always willing to talk. So he talked to you. You just put up a story on cleveland.com/Browns if people want to find that as they're listening to this, if they haven't read it already. Louis did not back down when you talked to him. What stood out to you from your conversation with him, and what did you take away from it?
Well, first, let me say that I covered Louis Riddick when he was a Brown safety.
He was on that playoff team in '94.
Yes, I covered him 1993 to 1995, some crazy years, as we know, in Cleveland Browns lore. But he was here during those Belichick years, during those Saban years, and I just remember him vividly. So, he usually is willing to talk to me. And my big, huge takeaway from my conversation today with Louis Riddick, he did not back down one iota. He doubled down, he tripled down on what he said on First Take this morning, which was basically that he hopes that Shedeur doesn't go in the top three, and that he thinks that his camp would tell you the same thing. Well, guess what? I was there at the workout. I saw Louis Riddick at the workout. I saw Louis Riddick talking to Deion Sanders at the workout. They're very close. They played together for the Falcons in 1992. He went to bat for Louis Riddick to get the Jets GM job in March. And they're very close, and they have remained close. So if Louis Riddick is out there telling us that Shedeur Sanders' camp would tell you the same thing, that they don't want him to go in the top three, you have to listen. Now, this doesn't mean that Deion's not going to come out at some point and say, that wasn't me, that was him, we don't feel that way. But I think you have to listen to what Louis Riddick is saying because of his relationship with this whole situation, with this whole inner circle, with this whole camp. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and then of course you have, Shedeur was visiting with the Steelers, who are obviously picking much later in the draft. That was one of the teams that Louis named that maybe would be a good landing spot for Shedeur. Ashley, there's a ton to unpack here. I know you just read the story, and there's strong comments. I don't know how, you could look at the Raiders and be like, well, that's a better situation. Just because Tom Brady's a part owner, I guess. I don't know. There were some things he said about, well, is that really a better situation? Are the Saints really a better situation? I think it's all sort of even, if we're being honest, and we look at those rosters and those situations. But I do think it's interesting for the reasons Mary Kay said. He is obviously close with Deion Sanders, and he's close with that family, and he was literally just in Boulder talking to him. So, it's just an interesting twist 2 weeks out from the draft.
Yeah, my impression of this, and I know Mary Kay, he basically seemed like he was saying this exactly to you, is like the Browns and their quarterback troubles over the recent decades, to me, seem to really be coloring his opinion on this. And he essentially said there are other teams and organizations with proven track records of being able to develop quarterbacks. Now, I would argue, and he said no disrespect to Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, Billy Musgrave, who he obviously also knows really well, because we know Bill Musgrave's history with Deion Sanders too. No disrespect to those guys, but they haven't done that, right? I would argue they haven't really had the chance. We can look at what happened with Baker Mayfield, but at the end of the day, he wasn't their draft pick, right? So that to me was also an interesting part of this. But you do wonder, like, knowing how close he is to the Sanders camp, like, hey, is this just the perception of the Browns organization right now for them? Because of obviously everything we know with that prior established relationship and how assertive Louis Riddick was in everything he said.
Yeah, the Stefanski thing is interesting, and it's probably a whole other podcast with the quarterbacks he's worked with and whether he's actually developed quarterbacks. It seems like the guys he's had the success with are sort of, like Kirk Cousins was Kirk Cousins before Kevin Stefanski got there. Now, Kirk had his best season with Kevin as his OC, but he was still, it's not like Kirk was a raw rookie that he had to develop. The Baker thing fell apart. It took Joe Flacco to come in and kind of run this up. Like we haven't really seen Kevin get a young quarterback and develop him. Now, the flip side of that is he hasn't really ever had the chance unless you want to count Baker. But like you said, Ashley, that wasn't their draft pick. So, maybe that was doomed from the start. So I guess I can see where Louis Riddick is coming from. It does feel like Kevin Stefanski has a type. Lance Reisland has talked about this. I agree with him. I think Shedeur Sanders kind of fits that type. But Mary Kay, I did think, I guess if he kind of hedged a little, it was in the sense of, well, nothing against Kevin and these guys, but I also don't want Shedeur to go play for Kevin and these guys.
That was absolutely it. He said, I am not disparaging them, but at the same time, he's saying, I don't want to see him go there. He wants him with a Kellen Moore, who we saw what Kellen Moore did with Jalen Hurts last year. As you mentioned, Vegas, I mean, there are some things to like about Vegas. And then he loves Mike Tomlin. Now, he, of course, is speaking from some of his own personal biases. And I tried to point out in my story that Bill Musgrave does have a history of developing rookie quarterbacks. And I have this in one of my Bill Musgrave stories. I can't even remember who they are right now. I think Matt Ryan was one of them. I'd have to go back and look at that. I can't remember, but he actually was credited by a couple of rookie quarterbacks with their development and, some big name guys. So I think Billy Musgrave gives the Browns plenty of cachet here. I hear great things about Tommy Rees, their new offensive coordinator, young, up and coming, bright mind in the NFL. And then Kevin Stefanski, some of the quarterbacks that have been coached by him have had their best statistical seasons or some of their best statistical seasons under him, including Kirk Cousins and some others. He's worked with a lot of different quarterbacks. And remember, these guys got to the playoffs 2 seasons ago with 4 different quarterbacks. So I think they absolutely can and will develop a young quarterback very well. They're committed to it. They know exactly what they need to do. Again, I tried to point some of these things out in the story. Even if they end up with the Jalen Milroe, I think they're willing and ready to completely overhaul their offense for a quarterback like that. They're ready to do it. I've asked Andrew Berry that question point blank at the Senior Bowl. Would you do that? Could you pull off a Ravens and do that with the Jalen Milroe? And he said, yes, that's what we would do. And that's why I haven't really harped on the fit thing too much, because I don't think they're necessarily going for fit. I think they're going for best quarterback that they can possibly find out of this class. And it's a weird class. I mean, it's just, there's 2, and then it seems like there's the rest, and there's some sleepers, and there's some intriguing guys. But I don't necessarily think that fit with a system or Kevin's system is the priority here. If it happens like that, that's great. If you go with Shedeur and he happens to really do well what Kevin Stefanski, what his strengths are, then fine, they'll move forward with that. But once again, I don't necessarily think that's it. I just have to wonder, and I was telling you guys this before we actually turned on, hit the on button here, and that is, could they be taking a preemptive strike? Had they heard that the Browns are taking Travis Hunter or maybe Abdul Carter? I would say probably Travis Hunter over Abdul Carter. But have they heard that that is happening and really believe it? And if so, they're just kind of doing their own spin on the whole situation here. I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with it. Because when I left that showcase, I really did still believe that the Browns were deciding primarily between Shedeur and Travis Hunter. And I don't know what this is all about. I mean, you guys saw there, Dion said really nice things about Jimmy Haslam. There was lots of great chit chat going on. Pat Shermer talked about what a great fit this would be with Kevin and Billy Musgrave and all of that. So I don't really know where this is coming from. I don't really know. And I don't know if this is going to turn out where Shedeur Sanders is a Cleveland Brown on April 24th or if he's not.
Yeah, I mean, the fit thing, I'm with you. I don't think you take a guy for fit. I think we're all kind of on the same page as that. Now, what does that mean for Kevin long term? You cross that bridge when you get there. But you have to take, if you're taking a quarterback, you have to take the guy that you think gives you the best chance to win. Not even just next year doesn't even matter, honestly, with a rookie quarterback. The guy that gives you the best chance to win for the next 5-10 years. You're thinking long term here. This isn't like a short term quick fix investment type of thing. But I come back to this, and I think people, far be it from me to just outright defend the Cleveland Browns organization, against all smears. But I understand how someone could be nervous about, well, do you really want to go to Cleveland? They have can these guys develop a young quarterback? But do we remember Chip Kelly in the NFL? It failed miserably. Now, maybe it's going to be different now because he's gone back to college. He's had success. Maybe, sometimes it's better the second time around. Again, in New Orleans, I maybe they'll be okay, but we don't know for sure. I just think even the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, a great coach, a great players coach, but who have they developed at quarterback recently? I just think if that's your argument, I don't know that you can point at the Browns and say, well, they can't develop a quarterback, but boy, I remember Chip Kelly, what he did in Philadelphia. He did a great job developing quarterbacks there. I just don't think that's a valid argument as far as comparing those situations.
I mean, as you said, Dan, far be it from us to defend the Cleveland Browns on something like this, but I do think it's kind of warranted here. It goes back to what I was saying initially. I think a lot of this perception has to do with things that are decades old problems now at this point that has colored the perception of this team nationally in a certain way. And to me, that's what it sounded like. Because again, we have not seen this regime in this exact scenario yet to say, oh, well, the Browns can't develop a quarterback. Look what they did to Johnny Manziel. Look what they did to Baker Mayfield. This is just not that situation to me. And I think that you look at 3-14 on top of it, right? And you look at the Deshaun Watson trade on top of it. And from the outside looking in, it's I almost can't blame people for having that perception of them. But I think when you dig a little deeper and get into the nuances of it all, you realize oh, that perception might be built on really shaky ground because this scenario hasn't happened yet, number one. And number two, some rookie quarterback is coming here regardless because the only guy that can throw the football on this roster right now come week one is Kenny Pickett. And that's just not going to fly. Again, this is a team that typically brings 4 arms into camp. And the longer we go, I'm getting footballs to the wall with Mary Kay that they're probably bringing 2 of these guys in here via the draft. And maybe Shedeur will be one, maybe it won't. But I do think to some extent this perception of you can't blame everything that's gone wrong with the Browns post 99 on Kevin Stefanski and a guy like Tommy Rees. Mary Kay's been writing this, we keep hearing great things about Tommy Rees. What if he is that next guy? And this is why he has risen the ranks so quickly and risen them at the places he's done it with a guy like Nick Saban, right? This is not the quote unquote same old Browns, even though they are coming off of that losing season and they are kind of easy to dump on right now, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the key point. And I'm not saying all that to hold the Browns up as this model, oh, they're going to develop any young quarter. I don't know. And I don't know if Tommy Rees is going to be a great offensive coordinator or if the Browns misjudged. I don't know any of that. But I just think, I just find it, and I respect Louis Riddick's opinion a lot. I mean, I've cited what he said about Cam Ward. I think he's really good. I just don't think it's fair to cite, like, Chip Kelly is a great offensive mind, and he changed college football forever. And he was awesome at Ohio State last year. And like I said, maybe that second time around in the NFL is going to be different. But I still think you can't just blindly point to him and say he's going to develop this guy at the NFL level, and not at least give the Browns a little bit of like leeway and a little bit of grace to, like, hey, let's find out if they can do this.
Yeah, I was very surprised about this. I was very, very surprised because here's what I think is going on right now. I think the Cleveland Browns, at least in this situation, are paying the Deshaun Watson tax or the Deshaun Watson price. We are just coming off of an NFL annual meeting where Jimmy Haslam sat there with us, a small group of Browns beat writers that were there, and said it was a big swing and a miss, and it's on me and D. And I don't think that it really is on him and D. I think it is on everybody in the organization. And I've said this numerous times. Jimmy Haslam wasn't sitting around one day and saying, hey, let's go trade for Deshaun Watson. That's not him. That's not who is going to come up with or originate that idea. He doesn't fancy himself a Jerry Jones. He's not one that is going to initiate these moves. But I think that is the perception in the case of the Deshaun Watson trade. I think people 100% firmly believe that that was Jimmy's idea and that he's calling the shots. And so if that's how you're perceiving this, then you don't necessarily think about what's going on with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and Bill Musgrave. You're thinking about Jimmy Haslam and how he is going to meddle in this situation. And I just think that's an erroneous perception. I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't. I think that those guys will be firmly developing this quarterback and driving that bus and in charge of this. And I just think that Jimmy putting the onus on him and D for that trade, I know what he was trying to do. He was trying to take that away from his kind of embattled coach and GM right now and just get that off their plate and let them start fresh with a new quarterback and a new situation and put that on himself because he's not getting fired, right? I mean, he's not going anywhere, but those guys will certainly go somewhere if things don't work out over the next how many ever years. So I think that this has so much to do with the Deshaun Watson situation. And I don't know that it should. I think that needs to be in the past, in the rearview mirror. I mean, they basically are distancing themselves from that mistake. And I want to reiterate this part of that. The Deshaun Watson mistake, the biggest mistake about Deshaun Watson was the part about the off the field stuff. Making a trade for a really good NFL quarterback who had made the Pro Bowl 3 times and looked like he might be able to take your football team to the next level. There were 3 other teams that were vying for his services as well. So that wasn't the mistake in trying to evaluate him as a quarterback. I don't think that they were completely 100% off base from a football standpoint. They did completely underestimate the off the field transgressions and how that was going to impact the whole situation. They did underestimate how long he would be suspended in his first season. I believe they thought it was going to be 4 games, maybe 6 games, certainly not 11 games. And then I also think that the final 2 years were completely awash because of injuries, just completely awash. And other things too, but there's no way that they got a good read on what he could have possibly been all about. It just didn't happen. But at this point, that's neither here nor there. But I do think that they are paying the price for the absolute debacle that turned out to be for whatever reason.
Yeah, and that was such a completely different acquisition too. Like that was a team that believed they were ready to go start winning, and they thought they were getting a quarterback who was going to push them over the top. And obviously that didn't work for a ton of reasons. They probably underestimated what him missing all that time, like sitting out that year, right? And then on top of that suspension, what that was going to do to him and how that changed things for him. So that acquisition to me is completely different than this acquisition, especially because you weren't bringing Deshaun in to develop him. You were bringing in what you thought was a finished product, what you thought was a guy who, after that 2020 season, before the accusations hit, there were people kind of whispering, is this guy the third or fourth best quarterback in the league? Like, that's what you thought you were bringing in. And you're not doing that now. You're bringing in a young player. This is a project, not like in a bad way. This is a development. This isn't what you were doing with Deshaun Watson. I think that's different. So it's probably unfair, but also, Ashley, that's kind of the nature of this business. It made them a laughing stock for the last 3 years. And there is going to be some fallout from that, at least on the outside.
Yeah, and I mean, especially because of the off the field issues, right? Like, it made everyone involved inherently unlikable. I mean, we know the negative opinions around Deshaun Watson going into this trade, before the Browns even traded for him, after they traded for him. And those negative opinions he brought to Cleveland with him, essentially. It created a PR firestorm, and it should have. Like, I mean, it's totally understandable that it did for those off the field reasons, but I do think that is an important distinction. No one was saying don't trade for Deshaun Watson because he's not any good. Everyone was saying don't trade for him because this might not be a good person. That was a totally separate thing. And there's all these issues surrounding him. So I think with that trade in general, we've kind of said it for years, like, whatever negativity it brings to them, they essentially did it to themselves. So it is a tricky distinction to have to make, but no one was questioning his off the field play. And because everyone involved is quite honestly such an easy target in a lot of instances, fairly, from the outside perspective, from the national perspective, it's going to all get lumped together in terms of what you as an organization can bring in terms of your quarterback acquisition and development.
Let's talk about the other part of this. Obviously, with the Browns having those other guys in for 30 visits, and this happening now, I'm starting to wonder, Mary Kay, this buzz has been building, right, since the pro day. Browns and Travis Hunter. People have been linking them together now really ever since that pro day happened. We've held pretty firm. I know you wrote a column yesterday. I keep saying, like, I don't want to get to not next Thursday, 2 Thursdays from now. I don't want to get to 2 Thursdays from now and they take Shedeur Sanders and I look over to one of you guys and I'm like, well, duh, of course, I should have seen this coming. We've been talking about it forever. All the signs are pointing to this. I will admit, today I'm hedging a little bit. Today I'm starting to feel a little bit like maybe this Travis Hunter thing is real. Like maybe these 30 visits with Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shook and Jackson Dart, maybe these things were like real things, and that's the way they want to go with their quarterback. This is kind of the first time where I've started to at least allow myself to start thinking maybe I'm going to get on that Travis Hunter bandwagon here. Where are you at right now?
Well, I would have to say that I do feel differently about the situation in the wake of Louis Riddick's words. I do feel differently about what they might be thinking and what they might be doing. And I've stuck to my guns this whole entire time, thinking that they needed to take the best quarterback available in the draft at number 2, which I have this whole entire time thought was Shedeur Sanders after Cam Ward. But hearing everything that I'm hearing now, either they know that Deion and Shedeur don't want him to come here and they are working around that, or they have some kind of a plan or strategy where they're going to draft Travis Hunter and then come back with 1 or 2 of these other quarterbacks. And I don't know if this changes anything or not. I don't know if they've had these kinds of conversations, but it has changed my perception of what could be happening here. Now, when I wrote my column yesterday saying that I thought that they should take Shedeur Sanders at number 2, that was just my opinion. It was what I thought they should do, not what I thought they would do. Because even when I wrote that, I still was thinking at that time, maybe they are taking Travis Hunter. Maybe they are going to buck conventional wisdom and not take the second best quarterback in this draft. And I still don't know at this very moment if they will move off that position of taking the second best quarterback in this draft just based on this Louis Riddick stuff. They're not really reactionary people. They're not. And they don't have to do what Shedor's camp wants them to do unless they have some intel that there's going to be a coup after this, and that if they take him, they'll just balk at the whole thing. Now, if you see in the story that I wrote, I did ask Louis Riddick about that, and he did say, hey, if they take him number 2, it's a feather in their cap. They won't be mad. It is what it is. It sounded like they will just go on their merry way, and he will come to Cleveland, and everybody will try to live happily ever after. And if that's the case, then I don't think the Browns will change their strategy because of what we're hearing today. Did they change their strategy because of what Myles Garrett wanted to do? No. And he was line in the sand. I'm not playing for that football team anymore. And they didn't budge from that. They didn't budge. They're like, we are not letting a player dictate what we plan to do. And we plan to have the best defensive player in the NFL on our football team. And maybe their strategy will still be, we plan on having the second best quarterback in this draft when we have the number 2 pick overall on our football team. And we're going to block out all the noise, and we're going to take him, and we're going to move forward. And we're going to prove to everybody, and to him and to Myles and everybody, that of course we know exactly what to do with a rookie quarterback. We've got some of the best and brightest offensive minds in the NFL right here in Cleveland. Maybe that is the thinking for them. I don't know, but this certainly, in my mind, shook things up today.
Yeah, well, and when you say second best quarterback, right? What if they're sitting there in their building and they're thinking, well, everybody thinks Shedor's the second best quarterback, but we think it's this guy, and we can get we have a different plan to get this guy. So that's the other wild card in here. And the flip side to what I said earlier, Ashley, about, well, I don't want to be sitting there 2 Thursdays from now thinking, well, duh, it was Shedeur Sanders all the way, is like, well, didn't the Haslam say we're okay waiting until next year for a quarterback? And they've had all these guys in for visits. And look, in my mind, whatever you think of Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shook, these guys are less surefire long-term options. Those guys are that's still in play, that you would draft those guys and kind of a year from now be like, yeah, I think we're still in the quarterback market, more than if you took Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward in the top 2. So there are some signs, and this probably just means the Browns have done a really great job of pointing us in a million different directions. There are some things that I would look at if they don't take Shedeur at number 2 that I'd say, well, yeah, of course, they were forecasting this too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be so easy in hindsight, no matter what they do. But in the present, still 2 weeks and a day removed from the first round of the draft, like, I keep coming back to these kind of warring sentiments that, like, of things we know to be true, right? And number one, what do we know about the Browns and this regime and how they approach the draft? And we know, obviously, they don't typically have a tendency to trade up, for one thing, right? It obviously looks like that's not going to happen. 2 has never traded up to 1 anyway, but that's just not something they do. And why? Because they are typically so big on taking guys where they are valued and where they can get value. And the only time they'll trade up is if somebody who they see valued really highly suddenly falling and they think they can get him, a la JOK. So Knowing that, you look at Travis Hunter and you're like, oh, well, like, yeah, the generational guy that they can get at two, that makes sense. But then I also keep coming back to this lack of a sense of urgency that it just seems like they've had at quarterback. And I know the Kenny Pickett talk, praise, whatever we want to call it, has picked up over in recent weeks, but it doesn't change the fact that there is one guy in that room right now. And the fact that he is the only one, I've been kind of thinking, like putting the pieces of the puzzle together again. Charlie Day with the bulletin board behind me, the Pepe de Silva bulletin board, and with red yarn behind me here. I've been thinking, like, well, that seems to point to, you would think we're going to see a rookie play early. Now, I don't know. Like you said, Dan, I think the way that we can enmesh those two ideas is, maybe you take Travis Hunter at 2, you find a way to trade back into the first round, and you get one of those, like, quote unquote, second tier guys that you really believe in. And maybe that's how it's all going to play out. But I just keep coming back to those two things. And now, like with the Louis Riddick comments on top of it, it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting wrinkle. I mean, I was sitting here yesterday, you guys know, saying like, well, I don't know if I'm going to do 2 more mock drafts between now and the draft because I don't think my opinion's going to change. And now, like, I feel like I have to do one and play out the scenario in these simulators where, hey, what do they do if they take Travis Hunter? Like, it is making me go down that rabbit hole a little bit more at the very least, which, as you said, Dan, maybe that's the goal all
along. The draft process is too long. That's the problem. I mean, think of all the... For as firm as we've been sort of on the Shedeur thing, just think of all the stuff that we've talked through and all the different directions this podcast has gone when it's come to this draft and this quarterback situation. And there's still, I mean, we're recording this on Wednesday. When you hear this, it's probably going to be Thursday. There's still 2 weeks until the Browns actually go on the clock. So I keep coming back to this other idea, Mary Kate, like who knows what else could happen. And I guess I wonder, again, we know he's close to Deshaun Sanders. We know he was in Boulder. He was talking to Deshaun Sanders. But are we risking overreacting to what an analyst said on TV? Or, like, is it because of that relationship with Deshaun, do you have to take this more seriously than just someone sitting in a studio throwing out takes?
Absolutely. You have to take it more seriously. Let's say, for instance, that this was Stephen A. Smith that had said this same set of remarks. I don't think that you put the same weight on it. I really don't. I mean, these guys played together. They're friends. I was just out there watching them stand next to each other and talk to each other. I mean, Louis Riddick could someday end up working with Deshaun at Colorado. I think it's to that point. I mean, he just went to bat for him to get the Jets job. So this is different. This is different because he didn't just offer his opinion. He said, I think if you ask his camp, they would say the same thing. Okay. He is not going to say that unless he is reasonably sure. Now, having said that, I am guessing that Deshaun and or Shedeur are going to completely throw water on this and put the toothpaste back in the tube or clean up on aisle 7 or whatever they have to do to sort of fix this situation. Because certainly, I mean, we've heard Deshaun say he doesn't think he's getting out of the top 3. We just heard him say the other day that he thinks he's going to go, that one of those 2 guys is coming to Cleveland. And this doesn't jive with any of that. So I don't know what this is. I don't know exactly what this is, but it does seem to me that this is something more than a disconnected analyst saying something about how Shedeur's camp feels about this.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing you said earlier too was there is also this idea in play of maybe they're getting the sense that he is going to fall, because if the Browns don't take him, the Giants just signed 2 veteran quarterbacks. Geno is a guy that is just signed an extension. He's older. Maybe he would go to like a place. But you do start to see that scenario where he could begin to tumble if he doesn't go in the top 3. So I think that's worth keeping in mind too, is that aspect of it. Like, are they kind of getting ahead of this, like you mentioned? Are they spinning this a little bit before it actually happens? Just to make sure everybody understands, like, yeah, this is actually what we wanted.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I really could see that because this has been hard on everybody. It's been hard on everybody in that camp to hear the disparaging remarks and to hear the smear campaign against Shedeur. And so this could, like I said before, be somewhat of a preemptive strike. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting now. I can't wait to see how this plays out.
Ashley, are you having fun? Draft season, your first real draft season.
Is this what fun is? Is this what
You know,
draft fun is?
you know what it is? It's the content machine. It just
It
keeps
is
on
a
rolling.
content machine. Oh
It's
my
given us
gosh.
a pretty good pod here today, so I
It
guess we'll take it.
has. Yeah, we can take it. You know what? For that, I'll say it's been fun so far. But I feel like I'm just gonna. So the first day of the draft is April 24th. I feel like by April 26th at around 8 p.m., I'm just gonna be ready to hit the deck. Just be collapsed after information overload draft weekend.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely. Go ahead, Mary Kay.
let me say too, I was thinking about this the other day. It's a quarterback draft for the Browns, and that
Yeah.
is completely different than anything else. When you have the number one overall pick or the number two overall pick or any kind of a top five pick and you need a quarterback, it puts a whole different spin on the draft. If 2 years down the road or 1 year down the road or whatever, they're picking 21st, it just doesn't pack the same wallop. A quarterback draft, this is what it's all about. So I'm glad you're getting to experience it. I've been through this a number of times before, and it is an experience that you just can't describe until you live through it, until you try to get through all the madness that goes along with it. And it's even crazier now with all the social media that is connected to it.
All right. Well, 2 weeks until the draft here on April 24th when the Browns go on the clock. Of course, the draft talk is not stopping here on this podcast. We're going to record our next draft pod with Tim and Lance on Thursday night. We're going to be talking wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. I've seen some of their opinions on these things. It might get a little spirited. I bring this up because we are going to go live once again like we did last week on our YouTube channel. We'll go live about 6:30 this week. Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com is where you can see that. We'll get that tweeted out too on our podcast Twitter account, which is just Orange Brown Talk. We're on Instagram too, Orange and Brown Talk. And if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, it's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get signed up for that before we get to the draft here in 2 weeks. Now's the time to do it and get involved and become one of our texters. Okay, didn't expect this, but like I said, the content machine never stops here with the Cleveland Browns and these quarterback drafts. And I'm sure we'll be talking about a bunch more stuff like this on this podcast over the next 2 weeks. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.